Howdy there, partner, and welcome to the fire. Got here a story about a that player who becomes a that GM who ends up railroading one of their players. The time the worst player I ever encountered ran a Deadlands Game, r/RPG horror stories posted by the Mad Queen 96. So, the worst player had a whole story dedicated to him as a player, but I don't believe I mentioned him being a DM at a few stages. He ran a few games, all of which were bad, but there was one in particular I was definitely singled out in. This was actually prior to his character death in my campaign, so I don't entirely know the reason why I was singled out so badly. I will be referring to said worst player as Jay for this story. I haven't played a Deadlands game since this, and I'm not even entirely sure what edition this was, given this was a few years ago. You'll have to excuse a thing or two about my limited knowledge. At character creation, you have a certain number of points to allocate to various traits, but you can also take negative traits to get more points. Given I've been a sucker for westerns for a very long time, and Kingsman 2 had recently come out, I wanted to play a girl sheriff character who was good with guns but also used a whip in combat from time to time. The whip couldn't do much in terms of actual damage, but it was fun to have. Never had an opportunity to use it. But in order to live out the cowboy fantasy of whiskey, I had to take a few flaws. I decided to take a flaw that meant I was basically bad with technology like radios, which never really came up, but the main one to this story was a rival. Now, I'm not entirely sure what the in-game term is for this, but it's basically a nemesis of sorts, and there are different scales. You can get more points by choosing a higher end rival. In order to get a rank as a sheriff, I took a lower tier rival, thinking it would be an interesting plot hook. Jay grinned when he looked at my sheet. I didn't want to go with too high a ranking for the rival thing in case it put whiskey in too much danger or made things too difficult. First session, and a ranger/marshal PC showed up to my town to help me investigate a murder. Whiskey was the sheriff of a small town, and it turned out there were slug-like parasites infecting people. Think Slither. Whiskey and the marshal looked into things, discovered the creatures were hostile, and made a deal with the creatures for their own safety, saying that they could have the town in return for their lives. Both suggested returning to the town with reinforcements, given it was where Whiskey had grown up, only to find the town had vanished into thin air, with the dusk on the horizon literally telling the two to F off in ghostly whispers. So that's all the points used to become a sheriff gone in the first session. Next session, I missed, but session 3 had Whiskey join onto some kind of caravan, which I had no memory of doing. When I asked Jay, he said I had no memory of joining on, and when Whiskey tried to inquire with NPCs as to what she was doing there, things would turn black. There was a small encounter in some mines where the full party met up and encountered the rival of another PC who was an ordinary human who hated her for taking his family fortune. I bring this up because said player took the same ranking in rival that I did. Guy dies when the mine goes down. Session ends. Whiskey and a scientist character discover in the next session that she has one of the parasites embedded in her spine, and that's why she's been having blackouts. Said blackouts were very convenient for railroading Whiskey along with the rest of the party, given the trading caravan got her to the location of the party. A scientist character makes a roll, and Jay says that if he tries to remove the thing, Whiskey will die, so she's stuck with it forever. Jay laughs about how I'm so surprised and how I probably thought my rival would be some criminal. Whiskey talks to the thing and asks about the deal for her safety and that of the marshal. Parasite basically says that the deal meant nothing and it intends to stay. It proceeds to mock Whiskey, telling her she's a failure, parents never loved her, the works. Whiskey follows the party because Parasite said so, and they land in a town where Whiskey intends on having fun for a change. She tries to negotiate with the parasite into giving her more control as a means of teaching it about humans. Parasite reluctantly agrees. The following events happen over the course of one session. 1. Whiskey goes to a bar and finds she can't get drunk due to Parasite. 2. Whiskey goes to a whorehouse because she's depressed about the whole situation, with now the added addition of intoxication being impossible. And I request Jay fades to black, saying I'm not comfortable proceeding, but it's still what Whiskey would do with a bit of free time on her hands. Jay laughs, shakes his head, and says, "Oh no, you picked this. You're going to play it out." I had to play my character flirting with and requesting sex from one of the prostitutes. Reluctantly, I ask Jay if I see any and approach her. Turns out the woman isn't a prostitute, despite Jay saying otherwise. Apparently, she just looked like one, and was all surprised when Whiskey asked. She gets Whiskey in touch with one who specialized in female clients, and Jay says that basically Whiskey didn't even get to enjoy the sex because she blacked out and the parasite wanted to feel what it was like. So the poor former sheriff can't even enjoy the simpler things. 3. Parasite asks about some kind of gambling hall. Whiskey tells it to shut it, and the parasite tells her that if she won't take them inside, the parasite will just do it without her permission. Whiskey agrees to teach the thing how to gamble in return for a bit more control next time. Jay describes how I win the first few rounds and then things go black. I sigh with frustration and am shocked when Jay says that Whiskey wakes up in an alleyway with 3 unconscious mortally wounded men in an alleyway. On closer inspection, one of them is a deputy of some kind. Freaking out, Whiskey discovers that the parasite had been cheating at gambling, was escorted outside, and then the law got involved when she turned violent. At the sight of her killing a fellow officer of the law and watching him bleed out, she pulls a gun on herself and attempts to pull the trigger to take the parasite down to hell with her. And of course it doesn't work, due to another blackout. Marshal character, who had kept his rank, found the scene and helped Whiskey out. Whiskey begs him to take her to jail for murder, or at least kill her, and calls the guy out on breaking the law, given he's meant to uphold it. Session ends with the party covering up a homicide for a character who wanted to die anyway, and that was the last session, as the game fell through after that. TLDR, DM renders character creation points spent to live out a cowboy fantasy null and void during the very first session, then makes a low tier rival and impossible to remove parasite slug that can control my character at any moment in order to railroad her and single me out to the point where said character attempts suicide due to not being able to enjoy anything and the violent actions the parasite forced her to commit. Dang, now I can really empathize with the frustration OP here is feeling. While I will say having the parasite be the rival is actually pretty interesting and could easily lead to some really fun story hooks and such. In fact, they remind me of the Yerks from Animorphs. Sadly, the GM here was too heavy-handed with railroading. Also, the whole sheriff thing was done very badly, and the GM should have compensated OP in-game somehow. Taking player agency away like that is never a good thing. And that's our story. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button for more future content. Also, if you would kindly follow the socials posted in the description, that would be amazing. As always, be good, be great, be awesome.